Hello, my name is Dal McGill. I'm one of your Henrob Cobra torch distributors. I would like to thank you for your purchase or for your interest in our torch. We feel like we have one of the most unique, portable welding and cutting torches on the market. Remember, you are completely portable. We cut your gas consumption in half. You have a lifetime warranty. It's totally made in the USA. It's been out since 1982. Now with our torch, you can weld every metal but titanium from 4/1000 up to 3/8 plate. Some metals we can weld a little bit thicker. You can also cut from thin sheet metal up to 1-inch plate. So it's just an excellent piece of equipment that'll do an excellent job for you where you don't have to spend several $1,000s or more. Now before we show you how to set it up, before we show you how to use it, I'd like to share a few things with you. For you guys that are just getting started, if you'll do several things, read the instructional book, watch the instructional video, and practice. And if you will be patient, remember repetition is the mother of all learning. You'll love this torch. Now for you guys that have been welding for years, you got to be willing to change a few old habits. Just remember, even if you have a lot of experience, you still need to read the book, watch the video, and practice because this gun is very different. If you'll do that, you will absolutely love this piece of equipment. Now this right here is what should be in your kit. You should get the torch, which has a lifetime warranty on it. There's no O-rings, there's no seals in that gun. It's maintenance free. Each gun has a serial number on the back of it. If anything goes wrong, call Cobra Torches on the back of the instructional book and just send your torch back. They'll fix it or send you another one. This is the instructional video. You can watch it as many times as you want. We show you how to set it up, how to weld, how to cut all your different metals. You can also go back and reference it if you don't weld every day. Now this right here is the undercutter that comes with it. I have one mounted right here. The oxygen comes out on the bottom. This is your heating tip. I used a number 1, or you can use an optional tip, 0.5, which I recommend for heating because it puts a little less heat, the op tip to cut. When you cut with it, the bottom tip right there should be roughly about a 45. You got to keep the oxygen tip right down within a 1/16 of that metal. You can actually drag that bottom tip, but once you start cutting, watch nothing but the bottom tip. Keep it right down close to the metal. Now this right here is a cutting attachment. This is your guide wheels. This is the overcutter right here. I have one mounted right here. Now these wheels right here, which you can see, come with 2 blocks. Now you might not be able to see it, but this right hand block has got a notch. So when you take it off, put it back together, this right block right here must have a notch. That'll give you a nice steady hand, so if you have a shaky hand, that's going to stabilize you, give you a much nicer, finer cut. Now you can bevel, you can miter with it if you like, or we can just go ahead and take it off right here. I'm just going to take it off. Now this is the one that you pull. This is a copper tip and a number 2 from about 3/16 to 1-inch plate. You want to keep the copper tip straight up and down and pull. You want to keep that tip within a 1/16 of an inch. Once you heat the metal, once you pull the trigger to cut, watch nothing but that top tip. Keep it right down close to the metal. That's where you get your very precise cut. Now this right here is a warranty card. You want to send it in. Right up here in the corner is a serial number on the back of the gun. Fill it out, mail it in for your lifetime warranty. The instructional book. Now we give you a few little inserts with the rod numbers. We show you a little easier way to set it up, parts and a price list. Make sure you read through the book. Also we come back, make a few changes in here, so the dyno tune it a little bit. We speed up the learning curve. This back here is a parts list. This right here is a number right there to Cobra Torches. Now this right here is your tip cleaners. Our tip cleaners are smooth, they're not serrated. You get your wrench. This right here is an air acetylene tip. All you do is pull that shank out, that screws right up in there, runs off just 4 pounds of acetylene. No oxygen, it pulls it out of the air, sweat and copper pipe, silver soldering, brazing, or leading. Now your tips, this right here is the copper tip, that's for cutting. This right here is the alt tip, which is your smallest tip. That's what we use for welding 4/1000 up to 1/16. The number 1 tip has 1 ring, you weld 1/16 to 1/8. The number 2 has 2 rings, 1/8 up to 3/8 1/2 inch. The number 3, all I do is set the torch up with it or heat with it. Now also when you go to weld, you must use a cast iron flux, which is a high heat flux. You must use a high heat flux. We have several different welding fluxes, which I'll show you at the end of the tape for welding aluminum. Now when you weld aluminum, Cobra Torch has now got some glasses that are being made especially for the aluminum. We also have some different glasses that you can use. We have some special lenses, but you must have a special lens to weld aluminum to knock all the glare out. But these are items, these are optional items that you can get from your local dealer, distributor, or from actually the home office Cobra torches. Now you can get your stainless steel, these are stainless steel TIG rods, just regular mild steel, copper-coated mild steel rods, the aluminum rods. You can also get your cast rods. And also something right here that's new, we actually have a starter kit. It comes all in a nice little tube right here. It's very organized. You get some aluminum and some steel samples where you can go back and practice. You're actually going to get some aluminum rods, some stainless steel, some mild steel. You're going to get a cast rod. You'll also get a little jar of aluminum flux and a little jar of cast iron flux. That way you can go right home, watch the video, read the book, and have something to practice with. Start honing those skills very quickly. And also these right here are the new single stage regulators made especially for Cobra. They're very low pressure, excellent regulators. Also, we have a very, very excellent piece of equipment right here. This is your two-stage regulator that'll actually go down. You can really fine-tune all the way down to jewelry. This is for the oxygen only. Remember also there's several different aluminum fluxes. You need a high heat flux to get the maximum penetration. Your cast iron flux. Also over here we have some optional tips. Now this right here is a straight tip extension. What you would do is take the shank out. That screws right up in there. You would take one of your tips and screw it right on. That gets you in some real tight areas, doing cast, getting down the engine blocks, radiators, and so forth. Now we also have a curved tip extension. You would still take the shank out. That would screw in there. Now this will swivel 360 degrees. You come right down here, put the tip on. Does an excellent job of out of position welding. And there's also several different tips that you can get with it. Now between the 0 tip and the 1 tip is what we call the 0.5. Now that tip I highly recommend because it does a nicer job of welding 20 gauge up to 1/16 and also putting less heat in when you cut. Remember we use that on a heating tip. And also you aircraft guys doing chromoly tubing, that is an excellent tip. Now this one right here is a double 0 tip. Most guys do jewelry work with that. Now right here we have a tip in between the 1 and the 2. It's a 1.5. And actually this right here is a 2.5. In between the 2 and 3 does an excellent job of welding over 1/4 inch plate. Now we also have some quick disconnects for the oxygen and for the acetylene. That's very nice. You don't have to unscrew it. All you have to do is just quick disconnect it. It pops right out. And we'll be selling strikers. That's a quartz crystal. Also we have some lenses. Remember we get the real nice glasses that's being made for Cobra torches now for knocking the glare out on aluminum, which you must have. It's your hoses. Different lenses right here that we also have for doing the aluminum. These are all optional. Just contact your local dealer, distributor, or Cobra torches, and we'll be glad to ship out any of these if you have any questions or anything. We'll be putting our toll-free number, our email address, our website. It will be coming up on the screen in just a few seconds. Now this is one way of setting the torch up, but before we set it up, make sure that you put your check valves on. They come in the kit, one on the oxygen, one on acetylene. They hook onto the torch, the hose hooks up. Also, before you start, make sure that you read the safety regulations right inside the instructional book. That's very important. Safety must always be first. Now when you set it up, what we're going to do right here, we're going to come over to the oxygen, back the regulator off, come over to the acetylene, back the regulator off where there's no pressure coming to the gun. The line content should read 0 on both your gauges. You're going to open your oxygen valve. You're going to open your acetylene valve where you have contents coming to both of your tanks. So you've got pressure to the tank, but no pressure to the gun. You're going to open your valves on the oxygen and acetylene at least one full turn and put the number 3 tip on. That has 3 rings on it. So we've actually come over here, back the pressure off on the acetylene, the pressure off on the oxygen, cut your tanks on. Make sure your check valves are on. Open the valves, oxyacetylene on the gun, one full turn, put the number 3 tip on. We're going to turn the acetylene in at the regulator, get a little bit of a flow coming out of the gun. You can hear it. Light it. Go just a little over 4 pounds on the acetylene. We're going to turn the oxygen in until we get a neutral flame. So we come here on the acetylene regulator, turn it in till you get a little bit of a flow. We're going to go just a little over 4 pounds. It'll read right here on the acetylene regulator, it's low pressure. We're going to cut the oxygen in until we get a neutral flame right down here. So turn it in real slow. Get a small neutral cone, all those hairs disappear. Come down, cut the oxygen off first, then cut your acetylene off. Now you're ready and set up, and now you're ready to weld or cut with a torch. Now this is the other way to set the torch up. Now notice that we have the new Cobra low pressure gauges. These are excellent gauges. All dealers and distributors actually have these now. They're being marketed for us. It's an excellent regulator. All we're going to do is take your torch, make sure that you put your check valves on. Just hook your hoses up to it. Go ahead and put the regulators on to your oxygen and acetylene bottle. All we're going to do right here, it's a very simple way to do it. As long as you have the low pressure gauges where they're reading, you can come down to the acetylene. What we're going to do is turn the knob. What you want to do is turn it in until it hits 5 pounds. The reason you say 5 pounds, once you open the torch down here, because the torch is closed right here when you set this up. All we do is turn it in to 5 pounds, because when you open up the acetylene knob, it's going to go back to 4. Now the same thing on the oxygen. All we're going to do is just turn that in till you hit 5 pounds right here. So your 5 pounds is showing on the oxygen, 5 pounds showing on the acetylene. And once you open your acetylene or your oxygen to light and start to weld, it's going to drop back to 4 pounds. That's the simplest way. We really recommend these low pressure regulators. They do an excellent job. You'll be very happy as far as the quality. After we have set the gun up, the next thing is deciding what tip to use. Now our tips are set up not by the type of material, but strictly by the thickness that you're going to weld. Our smallest tip, the alt tip, is good from 4 thousandths all the way up to 1/16 thick metal. That's any metal. Your number 1 tip, you have 1 ring around it, 1/16 to 1/8 thick metal. The number 2, you have 2 rings around it, 1/8 to 3/8. The number 3, the one we set it up with, we weld and heat over 3/8 thick, and also your copper tip is used strictly just for cutting. Now 2 extra tips that don't come with the kit is a straight tip extension strictly for welding, and also a curved tip where you can turn that 360 degrees and weld out of position and weld overhead and do a very nice job. So once we've set the gun up and we've decided what thickness of metal we're going to weld and we've selected our tip, we will now start to weld with our gun. We have selected our alt tip because a lot of our samples right here that we're starting out with is less than a 1/16. So when you set the gun up, they tell you to turn the acetylene on first. I always give just a little bit of oxygen where you don't get so much soot. So we're welding the aluminum. We'll actually weld every metal with a neutral flame. What I'm going to try and do right here is actually show it with our lens right here. You can see right there where I got just a little bit of feather right there. So if you just bring that feather in just till it disappears, that's the same thing as a neutral flame, just like a regular torch. So we actually weld every metal with a neutral flame except stainless, where we use a carburizing flame. Now a lot of people ask us why our gun is so different. All right, we have 2 mixing chambers in our gun, and so what happens, first of all, we have a very concentrated flame. See, a regular torch, you're lucky to get that close with it right there. We have a very concentrated flame which keeps all the heat in a very small area, and also the pressure coming out of that gun is about 70 to 80% less than a regular torch, so it's a very soft, very forgiving flame. So even if you've never welded, it's what we call a user-friendly flame, so when you're welding, you have complete control over that weld puddle. Also right here, because we have an oxygen-free secondary flame, it's actually sort of wrapping itself around that weld puddle, completely shielding it from the atmosphere. That's why we can just use just all standard rods with it. Now first of all, we're going to weld some very thin sheet metal. We're going to do some very thin aluminum. Now also we're going to use just a standard 4043 aluminum rod. It's what they call a standard TIG or Heliart rod, and a little bit of high heat flux. Any welding or high heat flux, a brazing flux, will not work with our gun. So we give you the name of a lot of different fluxes in our instructional book, but I'm going to be using some Forney flux mixed with just a little bit of water. You see right here I've already mixed a little bit of flux, just a little bit of water. You can make your little small angle tray. We use very little flux when we're actually welding. Just take a very light coating right there, and you can flux that rod up, and then you're ready to weld with it. All right, so we've got our aluminum. So we come back with our gun right here. I'm going to cut the heat up just a little bit, still a neutral flame. Now, aluminum we weld just a little bit different. Actually, also with our particular gun right here, compared to a regular torch, we move it very little. A lot of the guys that do a lot of oxyacetylene welding, they actually teach you to move it a good bit. The way to weld with our gun is to move it very little. You actually want to keep that little cone right there just up off the metal, and the less you move that torch, the better it is. You start moving it a good bit, and the heat's going to spread on you. Now, as we start to weld aluminum, I'm going to get a little puddle. Actually, it's like a little jello effect, a little wrinkling. And once we get started, you just reach in there and just touch a rod. You might have to touch it 2 or 3 times to get it started. And once we get it started, you've actually got to push the rod in the puddle and pull it right back out. Okay, we've got our special lens set up here where you can actually watch the welding demonstration. So take that little cone, keep it just up off the metal, keep your rod out of the way, just circle just a little bit, get both sides of the aluminum to where it's molten, where it's melting, because it must be molten before the rod will take. And just reach in there and touch it a couple times to get it started. And once you get it started, remember the less you move that gun, the nicer the weld puddle is going to be. Push the rod in the puddle and pull it right back out. Notice also that I've got that gun no more than about 30 degrees off perpendicular. A lot of times you might even want to hold it straight up. The closer you get to the end of a weld, you might want to practice actually getting that gun to where you're almost straight up and down, because that heat spreads so much at the end of it. All right, now I'm going to stick the aluminum just in a little piece of water just to cool it off, because I actually want to show you just how flat and just how nice a bead you get with 100% penetration, and even on a small piece you should get very little distortion. Now, a lot of your technical schools, as we go in to demonstrate our gun, the first thing they want to do is start bending our coupons. As you can see right there, bending it from the back side and actually going right across that weld right there, that as far as a tensile strength and yield strength, that right there is very strong. Now, when you start to actually go up and weld thicker aluminum, this right here is just a manifold. It's about 1/4 inch thick. What you would have to do is go in and preheat that aluminum to about 300, no more than 350 degrees. Take a 1/8 diameter rod right there, put some flux on it. Remember, high heat or welding flux. Bevel it just a little bit, preheat the aluminum, and then go in and weld it the same way. Just wait for it to start wrinkling. If you don't preheat your aluminum, you can hold that heat all day and it'll never melt. It'll just ball off on you. Also, while we're doing some aluminum right here, what I actually want to do is actually cut a piece for you. I'm going to take just a real thin piece of aluminum, because when we start cutting some of our non-ferrous metal, that actually what happens, we do not use oxygen. What you want to do, if you're cutting some of your non-ferrous metal, is take the same tip that you're going to weld it and cut it up sort of to its highest setting right there. And what we're going to do, we're actually going to take the end of that little cone, and it's like chopping wood. We're just going to move it straight up and down, cutting that. It's what we call a control melt cut, with just the end of that cone right there. So what you want to do is you get right in there, take that little cone, straight up and down, just straight up and down, and as it melts, that will dictate just how fast you can cut with it. Now, I know that might not be a plasma quality cut, but you can see the front side and the back side that is a very nice cut for just 4 pounds of oxyacetylene on your aluminum right there. Now, also, while we're on the aluminum, we just got back from a farrier's convention. So what we want to do is actually be able to weld. Now, we've done come in here and actually cut that shoe. You flame cut it the same way. Of course, that's about 3/8, so I would use my number 2 tip to do that. There's a lot of different tabs that these farriers are putting on their shoes right here. And you can see this particular one right here. Now, we've had one here that we actually welded up before. All your different tabs you can weld up. And so for your farriers, it allows you to do some very nice welding and cutting without having to use electricity or a special gas. All right, notice how cool those tips are. All right, now we're going to use our number 2 tip, because that's about 3/8 thick. So come here and put your number 2 tip on. We're also going to have to use a 1/8 40-43 aluminum rod. You can use some 40-43 aluminum, 53-56, some 1100. Just come right back, flux it up. So with the number 2 tip right here. A lot of you guys have been having to use a TIG or a MIG, very nice pieces of equipment, but also very expensive. But we're able to weld those shoes out in the field with just standard oxyacetylene, using your same hoses, same regulators. Just put our gun on. You can make some very difficult welds and cuts, which is going to save you a lot of money. All right, so we're going to come in here, still with a neutral flame right there. Remember, there's your feather. Just take it off till it disappears. The longer that cone is right there, the hotter it's going to be. We're going to come in here and just sort of preheat it just a little bit. Remember, on your thicker aluminum right there, you've actually got to come in and preheat it just a tad, because if you don't, it won't quite be hot enough to melt. Also, while we're at it right here, while I'm sort of preheating that, I'm going to come right here and hook my lens up again, where you can actually see the weld puddle. All right, so you can actually see right here as your aluminum starts to melt. Just come here and push your rod in. Also, if you see you're just a little bit hot, come back and cut that heat down if it looks like it's melting too quick on you. Just push that rod in. Just pull it right back out. All right, we can come right back over here to the other side.